Hello, and welcome to the Procurement Game Changers podcast, brought to you by Consulting Quest. Ever wondered how the leaders get it done? What differentiates them from the rest of us? Let's tune in and learn from the best leaders in the procurement space. Let's do it. And now, over to your host, Helen Lafitte.
Welcome to the Procurement Game Changers, the podcast for leaders that make a difference. Today, we'll be talking about the importance of supplier relationship management in procurement. And to discuss this topic, I have the pleasure to receive Kevin Giblin. Kevin is the head of strategic sourcing at Fitch Group, Inc. Fitch Group is a global leader in financial information services with operations in more than 30 countries. Kevin is a 2017 EPIC Award winner for excellence in procurement. He has more than 27 years of experience in the procurement industry. So welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks for having me. I look forward to having a chat today.
Wonderful. So Kevin, could you tell us what led you to procurement?
Yeah, interesting story. Probably many people have the same type of path to procurement where start out doing something else. Let's remember that the word sourcing didn't even exist in most dictionaries until the 90s. And procurement as a function was typically handled by business persons themselves, kind of doing it along with their daily chores. So I remember earlier in my career, I had been in a small company and I was in the facilities department, also asked to handle record storage. And then, oh, by the way, that led to purchase some things too that the company needs. There was a company shift, an acquisition, and then I was asked by my new manager, who came from GE. He worked on the Jack Welch, so it's actually a pretty good mentor for my career. He said, "You're doing facilities, records management, and purchasing. Pick one." And that was the extent of the conversation. Pick one, and I said, "I'll pick purchasing." And he said, "Wise choice." And so here I am. I was at a conference years and years ago, even before that. And there was about 300 attendees in that seminar. And the speaker said, "How many of you started your career in procurement?" And nobody raised their hand. Said, "How many people were doing something else well, and then you were asked to take on procurement?" And almost everyone raised their hand. So my story is probably not unique, but there's how I got my story.
No, absolutely. And I can share that. I didn't start my career in procurement either. So yeah, here you go. So today we're going to talk about supplier relationship management. And supplier relationship management is a process to continuously measure and improve the relationship with suppliers, starting with their actual performance. So SRM, as we often say, is associated with various SaaS platforms, but the approach is much wider and can yield tremendous benefits. So why is supplier relationship management so important in your opinion?
Why is it important? Well, I think let's take the question the opposite way. What would happen if you don't have a supplier relationship? And so I think that's the better question to ask. But why is it important? Because I think what's really important is this is someone who's providing a product and or service to your organization. Without them, you have business continuity risks. So you want to make sure that you build a relationship with them. So it's not just about the contract SLAs. It's not just about the quarterly business reviews. It's about what can that supplier also do to help be more innovative and help us be more innovative as a company. And so it's building the trust, building that advisory type of a role from your supplier relationships. That goes way beyond how did you do against the KPIs.
So SRM is often associated with tools and systems, but it's a little bit like, the CRM, is that if you limit your transformation to the tool, then it can very quickly fade and actually doesn't stick. So is that something that in your experience is true as well with SRM?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's an old adage that if you have a broken process, the only thing that a tool will do is facilitate visibility to that broken process. So I think you can have an effective procurement organization without tools. You can have effective sourcing organization without tools, and you can have effective SRM without the tools. Can they help complement what you put in place? Yes, but I think if you don't have the right infrastructure and program in place, the tools will not help.
I have a different version of that adage. I have, if you digitalize a shitty process, you just have a digitalized shitty process.
There you go. That one too.
I can say pardon my French, right? I can say that.
I gave you the cleaned up version. Right?
So why do you think some companies are neglecting their supplier relationships?
I think it's because they have a misconception about what supplier relationship is. I mentioned earlier, a lot of companies have this notion that it's about making sure that the supplier met their SLAs. And if they don't, just yell at them and kick and scream. If that's the only thing you do with supplier relationships, then you're missing the point of what it's all about. Similarly, it's a subset of the procurement family, right? So similarly, there's a big misconception about what strategic sourcing is versus procurement. It's the same thing, right? No, it's not. If someone wanted to buy a pen and they went to procurement, procurement would go to the catalog, say, how many do you need? Make the transaction, and you'll have your pen shortly. But if you had the same question to sourcing, say, well, what do you need the pen for? Are there other options for you? Do you want it to be a recycled instrument? Do you want it to be from a diversity and inclusion supplier? And why are you getting a pen in the first place? Can't you use your computer to write? So we asked all those questions. Same thing with supplier relationship management. It's not just about the performance. It's about how is that supplier's long-term viability? Can they be a partner to us, maybe in other areas that they're not working with us today on? So it's a more big picture, holistic approach.
No, I agree. And I've heard in other industries, in particular, I work in healthcare as a consultant, and they were working on co-development with their suppliers. And that goes into what you were saying. It can go just beyond just a relationship and the performance. Sometimes the relationship you develop, it's much more than a client-supplier relationship. So that's why it's very important. But how do you build and manage those supplier relationships? And can you give us some kind of practical examples of how it could look like?
Yeah, I think you can't do it with every supplier, obviously, because that's where that segmentation approach comes into play, where you look at your critical strategic suppliers. I'll give you an example of a supplier that on the surface, you wouldn't think this would fall into that strategic, high important category. However, it became that way. We looked at our office supplies relationship and said, we could do much more with this. Now, at the time, we spent quite a bit on office supplies and the market's changed. But having this relationship, we ended up doing things with the environmental initiatives were really important. We reduced the number of the dollars per order, which lowered the number of deliveries, which reduced the carbon footprint. So there was that benefit. But then there were things beyond that where the supplier would come to us and say, hey, we had a customer in Iowa, for example, that they retrofitted all their warehouse lighting and they saved millions of dollars. Now you would think about that and say, why does that matter for an office supplies company? What's in it for them? The answer is nothing from a revenue standpoint, but it builds that trusted relationship that, hey, we found something out that you might benefit from. So we want to share that with you.
And so we started talking about the benefits. Beyond that, what would be the benefits from having best-in-class supplier relationships?
Well, the best-in-class benefits of having that kind of supplier relationship is, things that help your company's brand. We partnered with a number of key suppliers. Say, hey, we wanted to be in the top 100 green or environmentally friendly U.S. companies, and so we put together this roadshow, brought in some key suppliers, and said we want to be in this together. And lo and behold, we ended up being from not even on the radar to in the top 25 in the span of 2 years.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So what would be the challenges then?
Challenges is getting buy-in from the business to participate because it's not a per se savings initiative. It's not necessarily an efficiency initiative, but it is a brand impact initiative. And whether you're a public or private company, that has a significant impact on your stakeholder viewpoint of the organization.
Is there a risk of having too much intimacy with your suppliers?
Yeah, of course, because you run the risk of having a dependency on them, that they become not a single source, but a sole source, and you kind of paint yourself into a corner. You don't want to be in that position.
So what do you think about supplier enable innovation and supplier awards? Is that something that you work with?
Yeah, I do. I like that a lot. I can give you an example. There was a supplier who, visiting their warehouse, they actually had plaques up on the wall, Supplier of the Year 2012, 2013, 2015. Now, customer will visit there and say, what happened in 2014? And so that means we did something wrong that year. We want to go back and earn the trust so we can get that award back on the wall. So there's a motivation factor there.
Yeah, and to a point previously, when you want to do co-development or get some ideas from your suppliers that see other clients and see in the same industry sometimes, that can give you some idea on how to improve either your processes or the way you manage your supplies. All of this is also part of that. It's not only product related, it can be also in the process, in the way you engage with the supplier. There's so much to learn from each other, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
So does SRM apply in your view to all categories? Of course, I'm going to go back to my own little, chapel, as you say. Professional services and consulting in particular, it's a weird category, I would say. But do you think that whatever you said before on supplier relationship management applies to those categories?
I think it can apply to any category, but maybe it's addressed a little bit differently. Obviously, if it's a product supplier, there's one side of it. If it's a service supplier, there's a totally different side. The margins are different. They're different lines of business. They impact the business in a different way. But I think there's always ways to create this collaborative, innovative partnership, no matter the.
Yeah, I think that you have a point in saying you address it differently. In my experience in consulting, in particular, the business are much more involved in the process of procurement, and therefore they probably also should be in the supplier relationship management. So it has to have some balance between what the business lines do, what the procurement does, and how you make that make sense.
I agree. The stakeholder involvement for sure. The communication across functions.
Yeah, and you said that before, collaboration with the suppliers, but then you have also all the collaboration internally with your stakeholders, etc. This is a big top. That could be another podcast. Another topic in itself. So now it's the time for the takeaway. So what is the one thing that you would like our audience to remember from our conversation?
I think you want to think of SRM, Supplier Relationship Management, the same way that you would want the business stakeholders to view procurement. It's much more than you think on the surface, and you need to invest the time and effort. And if you do, there's benefits to the program.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for your time. I know it's a topic that's close to your heart, so I hope that you were able to really say it and describe it as you wanted. I hope that our audience will also be very interested in SRM in now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So now it's your turn to tell us about your experience and your challenges with supplier relationship management in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to be notified when a new episode is out. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if that's the case, don't forget to give this a thumbs up. So happy sourcing to you all. Bye and au revoir.
And that's a wrap for this episode of our Procurement Game Changers series. But we'll soon be back with yet another exciting session with one of the movers and shakers from the procurement space. Meanwhile, remember to visit our website at consultingquest.com for more consulting updates and procurement know-how, and join us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Until then, goodbye from the entire Consulting Quest family. Have a great day.